We spend far too much time worried about what makes us different than the next person or better than the next person, and not enough time thinking about why we should respect the next person. We all have a story, an overarching theme that runs through our lives and makes us who we are. The problem is, we think that since each of our stories is different, there's not a lot of perceived value and shared struggle. But we have far more in common than we can imagine, and what motivates one person can certainly help us as well. The Third Lab podcast is about understanding, respecting, and appreciating the struggle that it takes to overcome immeasurable odds in order to reach your destiny. Join me as I interview and bond with some of the most inspiring and incredible people, diving into their why to get a full understanding of their being. Without each other, we have nothing. So let's go on this adventure together and take on the future with open minds and open hearts. Welcome to the Third Lap Podcast. What's going on, everybody? Thank you again for tuning in to the Third Lap Podcast. One of my really close homies, brother of mine, Daniel Grimes, who has been such a tremendous help to me throughout my entire career. And so, DG, man, what's going on? How's everything going?
What's up, Malcolm? How's it going?
Good, man. Good.
It's honestly, it's an honor for me to talk to you. So thank you for thinking of me as a guest. When you reached out, I was flabbergasted, but I appreciate it.
I got to. I gotta have one of the most entertaining people that I know. So DG is my man. We'll get into how we know each other in a second. But Daniel Grimes is the weekend morning anchor and reporter at NBC 29 WVIR TV. Also the host. Are you still Daniel's desk? Is it still going?
No longer. It works, yeah.
Okay.
It's a work in progress.
Host of Daniel's desk and all around just rock star dude, man. Just a great human being and awesome person to know. And so, Daniel, that was just a brief introduction. But is there anything that I missed? Anything that you want to add?
No, you got the highlights.
There it is. Okay. And so, how do we know each other? So I met Daniel about 5 years ago working for Uncommon Schools. He was one of the recruiters for the Newark region, so North New Jersey. Had the opportunity to work really closely with Daniel throughout my time there before I transitioned to go work for Selected Incorporated. And in that time, we worked together around Uncommon Institute, so many different things. My first introduction to Daniel was when I started. He sent the email with Oprah, and we'll get into Oprah, I'm sure, like the motivational piece, but sent the email with Oprah in it. And I'm like, who is this person that like sent this Oprah meme in this email? And Daniel comes barging into the room, handing out hugs and just a bundle of energy. And that's pretty much how I've known him ever since. Daniel doesn't wear socks. He wears nice shoes and no socks. My wife saw him in the train station one day and was like, I think I just saw Daniel. And I was like, how do you know it was him? He's like, oh, he didn't have any socks on. I was like, yep, that was DJ. That was definitely him.
You have to add that it's regardless of what time of year, I really don't wear socks. So
this is 365. Yes, I respect it. He has lotion on though, so I respect it. Unlike my dad who doesn't wear socks and doesn't wear lotion, and I gotta yell at this man constantly. Daniel has his lotion on, so he's at least partially responsible. But Daniel, it was so great to meet you, work with you. You were the consummate professional. You brought so much legitimacy to that role, having taught and also been a recruiter. But yeah, I want to talk at all about just how we met and just those uncommon times.
I just can't believe that it's been 5 years. I mean, that time has just gone by insanely fast. But yeah, Malcolm and I met 5 years ago at Uncommon. I've been recruiting there for about a year after I left teaching, and we'll get it, I guess, to that bio piece a little bit later. But after being there for about a year, you came on through another one of our colleagues, Olivia, who was just amazing. And she was like, listen, I worked at this organization called Selected. There's this guy, Malcolm, who's going to be joining our team. And I was like, oh, sounds good. We were down people. We needed some good energy. And then in comes Malcolm walking in, swag on level 1000. And okay, as Malcolm said, I'm not a swag person at all. Like, I really have not a cool bone in my body. But Malcolm is the exact opposite. He is like Mr. Cool, chill, just amazing. And the energy that, you brought to the recruiting efforts of reaching out to folks. I mean, it is such a hustle with education in this space, especially as competitive as the education space is in New York City. So the fact of just the hustle that you brought to that space was impressive. And it was a really great time getting to connect and work and brainstorm with you and just think about how can we, increase diversity with bringing more Black teachers, bring more Black men into teaching, and just the brainstorming that went into that. It was a fun collaboration.
Yeah, it was great. And it was actually the other way around. So I brought Liv to Uncommon because we worked
Oh,
together at
that's right.
Citizen Schools. I just came across Uncommon randomly. Like I found the job posting and applied, and Deanna got back to me in like 2 days, and then I had my interview with Kev, who I'll talk to in a later episode. Uncommon was the most rigorous hiring process I have ever been through. The toughest. Rachel Modica Russell was a part of the process too. Shout outs to
Ooh.
her. And so, yeah, it was the toughest hiring process I've ever been through. I value it though because pretty much everything from there has paled in comparison. So made it through that, and I was like, listen, if I could do this, I could do anything. But no, the outreach work that we did between New York and Jersey was tough. Like that part of the work is so difficult and is not as mechanical as selection. Finding people is very, very different. And so, you and I spent a lot of time working together. Like, how do we find people?
I
Where are we
mean,
finding Black male teachers? Because that was really the challenge.
it is really the education space as a whole is suffering. Every time we
Yeah,
talk to, a grad school professor or someone who's been in the industry for a while, they say just applications are down for grad school and education. Applications
yeah,
are down for Teach for America. Applications are
yeah.
down for people entering the teaching space. And so, that it was really challenging trying to find people who were eager to do that work.
100%. And so, we worked together to kind of tackle that. And I feel like we did a pretty good job in the time that we worked together. And so, DG, we talked about how we know each other. I gave you an introduction. Where are you from? This is the like rep your hood section. So rep your hood, DG. Where you repping?
So wow. Again, see, this is the cool bone. I've like no cool rep in my hood. Okay. So um I am from Winchester, Virginia. It's a small little town in the Northeast, famous for apples, apple picking, apple sauce, all things gloriousness. This huge apple festival every spring called Apple Blossom. So that's pretty much it. It's a small little town. It's interesting that, you know, just I guess harping on where I'm from and kind of how that's led me a little bit to the person I am today. It's maybe a little bit more diverse now, but the town I grew up in and my high school itself had maybe five Black people in my graduating class. So I was one of five. And so early on, I was really comfortable navigating spaces that were majority white and that didn't, I was in the minority. And it wasn't actually until I came to the University of Virginia, went to college, where I first took a class at UVA, an African American Studies class, where I was actually in the majority. And I remember people making comments, like someone said, "Yeah, down with the white oppressor," and my face was, "Oh, what?" And I did the. I don't know if you ever had the experience. Any listeners who were growing up and they were the only Black person in their high school, et cetera, class, and you all talked about civil rights, or you talked about slavery, and all the white people looked at you, when we talked about this, as if, I was in the civil rights movement or enslaved. And so I had that moment where I picked the one or two white people in the room when they all were like, "Down with the oppressor, white people are terrible." I said, "Oh my God." And I looked at them and I thought, "You got to speak for your race." And so it was interesting. It was just, it was also interesting now looking back. Why did I feel uncomfortable in that moment for the white people in the room being like, "Oof, oof, y'all." Um, but yeah, no, it's small little town. It's cute. I appreciate it now more, having gone to New York City and having seen just this educational landscape. We both recruited for a high performing charter network, and just to think about the opportunities, especially for people that look like me and you, around this country, and how your zip code still determines so much of where your destiny. And so I'm really grateful for this, little country town in Virginia.
Yeah, I had never heard of it before. And so when we first met, we were just kind of chopping it up and talking about where we were from. And you mentioned the town, and I pretended like I knew. I was like, yeah, of course, I know what that is. I was like, I have no idea what this place is, man. And that story about being in the African Studies class is hilarious. And I've been to private schools and, in the very significant minority. So I definitely know what it's like to be looked at as like the expert. As I got older and I realized that it was important for me to understand my history, not necessarily to educate other people as much as to educate myself. And really like dove into making sure that I understood things from a non-European sort of perspective. But I'm dying just thinking about you clutching your pearls, listening to people talk. Like that's just so funny to me, man. That is hilarious.
We can get into this talk about education, but just thinking about how many things are not taught and what history is not taught. I mean, there were things that I learned as a history teacher, teaching my students that I was never even taught, even in college. So yeah, you're right that having that non-Eurocentric view of the world, it's ingrained in us early on.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when I was in high school, we were still learning about Christopher Columbus. So that tells you a lot about sort of and calling Native Americans and indigenous people of North America Indians. And so, that was 0203. Some
Okay, you're aging
space.
yourself, Malcolm. You're
That's
aging
okay.
yourself.
Listen, I tell everybody I'm 35, so it is what it is. I age myself in every episode, I think. So you also mentioned living in New York. So just talk a little bit about like some of the other places that you've lived so far that have impacted your development and where you are.
Okay, New York City, best city in the world. In the world. Love it. Literally just the it's just so dynamic. I think I love the energy. I love the diversity. I just love the people. And let me get something about New York. People are not mean in New York City. Okay, you have to use this, Malcolm. Do not cut this out. People are not mean in New York City. People are just about their own business. And I think that is having lived in New York City and then having now come back to kind of a smaller town in Virginia. The difference between the two is that New York City is a place where people are just busy, right? They're going about their own business. If you stop them and ask for directions, people are going to be more than likely, most people, to stop and help you out. But I just think people are just so busy and ingrained with just what they're doing that they're not thinking about other people. I think the difference between like small towns and suburbs is that I guess people are just more conscious about like, oh, what is my neighbor doing? You're like, what's happening across the street? So people are waving at you and talking to you more than what happens in the city. But that doesn't mean that New York City people aren't friendly because they're not doing that, innately. Um, and I'm actually, because I lived in New York City for 6 years, I'm still the type of person where it's awkward when people wave. I'm like, what are you, what are you doing? Like, why are you waving at me? I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get in my car and go work, right? Like, I don't know. I'm still such a like, or if I'm in an elevator, I'm like looking at my phone, not paying attention to what's around me. And again, maybe this is definitely something I've got to work on, but it's. I think New York City people are about the business, but the city itself, I just love the culture and the food and the theater, all of which right now, if we're talking about this pandemic and what's happening, it's definitely not the same, but still a thriving city. And for all of those memes that I saw that New York City is dead and it's not going to come back, New York City is a fighter. It will be here uh, long past any of us. So
Yeah, and I tell people all the time what you just said about New York City. Like people aren't mean, they're just busy. And like there's a drastic difference between the two. And so people are usually minding their business. Like they're going about what they have to do every single day. If you're commuting, especially on those trains, like you gotta be about your business because that train will leave you. Your connecting train will bounce on you and you don't know when the next one is coming. And so,
mhm.
it's important to be about your business. But like you said, people, I've asked for directions, I've asked people for help. Folks, New Yorkers stick together for the most part. And I love living there. Again,
Yeah,
like I always say, I'll never go back. But like never go back to live, but visit all the time. I still have family there and I love it. And yeah, man, it
yep.
was it was a great opportunity. The building where you lived was one of the best places I've ever been. And so yeah, I remember you had a basketball court and that nice deck and just it was incredible. So we had like a holiday party at Uncommon Schools. And so Daniel shows up. He's wearing the same thing as the CEO. So the dude lied about not having swag. That's a lie. I was gonna let him carry it until right now. So I'm gonna tell the story. So he pops into the holiday party, is like checking out what everybody's wearing. So it's me and my wife, we chilling, we talking, we see DG. He walks up to us. He's like, "Hey, I just wanted to see what everybody's looking at. Like, how's everybody looking?" Looks around the room, is like, "Okay, I'll be right back." We're like, "Be right back? Like, where are you going?" He's like, "I'll live right across the street." Man, goes across the street, comes back 20 minutes later in the flyest fit that I've ever seen outside of maybe my dad. Shows back up, stunts on the whole room, and I'm just like, this guy here, man. He don't wear socks, but he got the game sold up for real, man.
You know
So
that
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 whole game.
that was literally I yeah, no. Malcolm described the scene. It's hilarious. I went in and I was like, it was more so of I can't be wearing now. No shade at all to the CEO of Uncommon, who I love and adore. But I can't. I was 25 at the time, 26. I could not be wearing the same thing as a man twice my age. So if anything, it was again because I am so uncool. I said, "Oh no, let me go home and get into something different." So, yeah, if anything, that shows how uncool I am.
But that you had the wardrobe necessary to pull it off is the funny part. And yeah, shout out to the CEO, great guy. Shout outs to the folks at Uncommon School
Yeah.
still. I
Yes.
had an excellent time working there. I learned a lot from the people there. So anyone that's tuning in from Uncommon, shout outs to you all. And so we had a chance for you to rep your hood. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Well, quickly,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
mean, I also just I don't know. Have you seen the stuff that's made its rounds on social media about Uncommon and Black at Uncommon? Have you seen any of that?
Yeah, I have.
Oh, if you don't mind, what are your thoughts? I'm so interested in hearing and just talking about that. I mean, we can talk quickly. I'm sure you have thoughts.
Um, it's it's interesting. So a lot of what I've seen is from the perspective of students, and a lot of those students were from when Uncommon first sort of established itself. And I mean, we talk about charter management organizations, and a lot of them do have sort of like white savior complexes. Still to this day, some of them do, but many of them, like, that's where they originated, was like usually a white man identifying that like these black children needed quote unquote saving and kind of went about it that way. I was a part of a drastic change, as were you, an overhaul of some of the systems and procedures and definitely the people at Uncommon. I don't ever have anything really disparaging to say about Uncommon Schools. I think that the work that they were doing and continue to do really sets up some of our kids to go to college and be successful. But I think that like we aren't addressing some of what the opposite experience of what you had, right? So a lot of these kids only went to school with black and brown kids. A lot of them were from some really tough places in New York and Boston and New Jersey. And so when they went to predominantly white institutions, that was their first time interacting with white people. And I think for a lot of charter management organizations, that was a big oversight, which was not having those students interact with people that didn't look like them earlier in the process. But I mean, I have nothing negative really to say about Uncommon Schools. I love to hear your thoughts too. I would never discount how people feel because that's how they feel and that was their experience. My professional experience at Uncommon was very different though.
Oh, I mean, well, first of all, we're both about to get canceled for supporting Uncommon, so
Yeah, what
cancel
is what it
culture.
is, man. Cancel culture, that it changes by the day. It's
It,
24-hour news and then you back tomorrow. It will be all right.
that's true. Okay, so let me get canceled for a hot sec, but I just think you hit it perfectly. Uncommon is doing critical work that's empowering students and students that look like us to go far, right? That's the mission, literally the mission of how there's so many people that from a young age, they are, you know, taught about going to college. That's their vision, that's their goal, that's their dream. And so many people that go to Uncommon and go to any other charter school in New York City, that's not even in their foresight. That's not even, that's not something that is taught to them growing up. And so Uncommon has come in and has changed that and has sent kids year after year to not only college, but to elite college, and not only sent them to elite college, but it's gotten them to and through college. And so changing the goal of not just getting them to a college, but getting them to complete and get into a career. So there is always work to be done to improve that. And I think, again, knowing the CEO of Uncommon and knowing the people at Uncommon, I think that they are people that actually take feedback, right? There's some organizations that I've been a part of now, I'm not going to bash, but where they'll accept feedback. They say, oh, we want feedback. We're so feedback oriented. And then they do nothing with the feedback. They don't grow, they don't change. Uncommon isn't that in my experience. Uncommon is an organization that I already know that they are looking at, they've seen that, and they want to incorporate some of those conversations and some of those changes, like teaching the whole student, as you already mentioned. That was my biggest problem with Uncommon was, I railed up against this. I talked to my principal, I talked to folks about it when I did recruitment of these students were so focused on academics, which is important, but the social aspect of these kids, we have to make sure that we're teaching them how to be human beings. So yeah,
Yeah,
that,
and
that
I agree with that. Like the whole child approach, moving away from some of those punitive consequences to more restorative justice and whole child practices is definitely a growth for Uncommon and something that I hope that they continue to pursue. But like I said, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head. The people that we work with in that regional office, the people that oversaw the changes that are bound to happen now, definitely were listening. And like, I had really great conversations. And I think Kevin Bryant, who was the director of outreach at that point, led a lot of those conversations and, was in a really important seat for diversity and inclusion brought on. I remember looking at our recruitment outreach training, and it was like 5 Black men on it. And that's the most Black men that I've worked with in any non-school based role. And so, we made the moves corporately, and I hope that Uncommon continues to pursue making sure that diversity happens. But Quinn and all of these Black men that I see as principals in Brooklyn, like there's some dope people at the table really pushing for the right kind of change. And so, I know that hey, we might get canceled, Uncommon, like any other school, any other place has room to grow. Nobody's perfect, but I will say that like, they're headed in the right direction, in my opinion. Shout outs to Kip, where I am now. Kip, in the Philadelphia region, we've had so many conversations about where we were versus where we're trying to go. And in the 15 months that I've been here, Kip Philadelphia has made drastic strides towards becoming better, acknowledging what happened in the past, but also realizing that like cultural competence is our number one priority. Diversity is a number one priority. Anti-racist educators is a number one priority for us. And so if you can't acknowledge where you were, you can't ever move forward. And I don't see anyone really like, at least between Kip and Uncommon, ducking where they were, but also they're very, very meticulous about moving forward in the right direction. There's no slight to any organization, but if you're out here serving Black and brown children, make sure you have Black and brown people at the table making decisions, making
yep,
sure that you're listening to the families because they
yep.
give the best feedback that there is. If we're saying that we're serving these communities, but in reality we aren't listening to the communities, then we're doing them a disservice. If you aren't listening, I hope you hear this episode and start listening. But yeah, no hate on Uncommon, no hate on, I love Kip. This has been the greatest professional experience that I've had so far. Yeah, man, I appreciate you asking the question. I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but Daniel's out here doing his reporter thing. I love it, man. I love it.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
And so, DG, we've already gotten deep and we talked about the education piece. And so I'd love to hear about like the beginning of your career. How did you even start off in education? How did you decide that being a teacher or being in education in general was a place that you wanted to really start at?
All right, now we're getting to my bio, so everybody buckle up because this is the ride. This is the ride. So I was a third year, we call them third years, but a junior at UVA, and I was applying for internships. It had been ingrained into me that the best way to get a job is to get an internship. So I was applying for jobs on Capitol Hill. I studied politics. I was so interested in going to Washington and trying to affect change. And then it was the first time that I ate the biggest slice of humble pie. Listen, I've eaten some humble pie a few times in my life, and that was the first time I'd eaten a huge piece of humble pie. I got nothing. Rejection after rejection after rejection. So then I literally, in my searches, stumbled upon this organization called Breakthrough Collaborative, which is a teaching internship all around the country. And so I thought, oh, cool, teaching internship. There's an office in New York City. I'll apply. I literally applied on the last day The last day, it was a Friday, 5 p.m. I sent in my application on a Friday, like 3 o'clock. The next day, I get an email. Hey, we'd like to consider you for an in-person interview in New York City. So it happened to be over my spring break. I flew to New York City for the interview for during my spring break. Got an offer, I think, in person that day to come back and teach. So I thought, okay, well, I got absolutely nothing on Capitol Hill. Why not go teach? So I did that for a summer, taught in New York City, fell in love with New York. That was the moment where I was like, oh my God, this is the city for me. I love the energy. I love the enthusiasm. It matches my crazy ass. So can I cuss with this? I don't know. But it matches me. And then I also I liked teaching. Okay, let me be real. I got into it and I thought teaching's not going to be that hard. You're going to throw together a PowerPoint. You're going to throw together, this. You get to build relationships with students. It's going to be a piece of cake. And it could not have been further from the truth. I got there that summer and Breakthrough Collaborative, woof, it was the toughest experience I'd ever had at that point. Teaching was not a piece of cake. Putting together lesson plans, really engaging, trying to motivate students. And again, those were high achieving students. So students who had committed to spending their summers in a classroom still had to find a way to engage and educate them. Fast forward, returning back to UVA, I thought, okay, that was a good experience. Really enjoyed teaching, but I want to go back to, I want to go to Washington. I'm going to Capitol Hill. So I applied for jobs on Capitol Hill again, all the different, offices, got absolutely nothing. Second piece of humble pie that I had to eat. So I applied for Teach for America again as I had a fun time teaching in New York City last summer. So I'll apply for Teach for America. I do want to go to Washington, but, as a backup. Went through the process with TFA, got TFA in New York City, which actually I wanted Philadelphia because they had a partnership with UPenn, with University of Pennsylvania Masters. And I thought, oh, wow, a master's degree from UPenn would be pretty exciting. But I was placed in New York City, and that was literally the only job I got. I got it in December of my 4th year. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll go. It's only 2 years. I'll delay the dream of going to the Hill. So I spent that 2 years in Brooklyn teaching through Teach for America at Uncommon Schools. Loved it. Loved my principal. Shout out to JT if she hears this. I don't know if you know her, but she's amazing. Still is amazing. We're still friends. And everyone there. My co-teacher, Alex Bronson, who's now still a principal there. I met Quinn. We were at the same school, but he was at a different school. So everyone I met was just so passionate and engaged. It actually inspired me to stay a 3rd year. So I stayed a year beyond my 2-year commitment at TFA, and I loved that as well. It was so fun to teach, and that moment of when you're just trying to get students engaged and get them to understand some content, and they actually get it. It's profound, and any teacher out there knows what I'm talking about. It's amazing. And also I love Uncommon because as much talk as there is about how they stifle teaching and how they stifle kids, which I found some of that I guess true, some of that not true, they enabled me to be my crazy self. I was able to, live out some of my talk show fantasies of putting a quiz under every student's desk. And so when they came in and we started the time, I said, there's a pop quiz under your test. You've got 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Everyone gets a quiz, and then I had them go under the desk and get it really quickly. And, or I dressed up as King George III and I had them talk in accents and I was like, you colonists are the worst, and I had them talking French and British and all these accents of, people during the Revolutionary War, because I taught that. So it was fun. I really enjoyed the classroom. I enjoyed building connections with students. And talk about how old I am. My first set of kids just graduated from high school this year. I taught them in 5th grade, Malcolm. 5th grade. And now they just graduated high school. Oof. Okay. That's crazy. But yeah, so, and then am I still good? I know this is
No, you're good. I was just gonna say congratulations to your high school class. That's amazing. Yeah, and we still don't know how old you are. You could have started when you was like 20, so you good.
Okay. I'm 30. I will proudly wear my age on my, sleeve. I'm 30 years old, proud of it. But yeah, so then 3rd year teaching, at that point is when I realized, okay, I've enjoyed this for the past 3 years, but I just don't think it is, for me, long term. And so guess what I did, Malcolm? Y'all probably gonna guess. I started applying for jobs on Capitol Hill again. But this time, I actually got interviews. This time, I actually got to the final round interview. So I got to the final round interview of a senator's office as a legislative aide, and they brought me in. I did the whole round, and they asked me. This was May of, I can't remember the year, but 2015, I think. And they said, well, can you start next week? Well, teaching ended at the end of June of that year. So I had a full month and a half left of teaching. And I said to them, no, first of all, I've got kids that I want to see through the rest of this year. Second of all, no, I live in New York City, so I can't just move to Washington next week. And third of all, no. So I said, I'm happy to start at the end of June, happy to start in July. I'll literally finish my commitment at the end of June, start that following Monday, I'll do it. And they said, we've got college kids who can start next week who are graduating now. And so I didn't get that offer. But, it felt good to know. And actually, I interviewed that senator last year. And I told him, I said, Senator, your office rejected me for a job. And it was just so fun to have had that full circle moment. And so I went to my principal and I said, listen, this is what just happened to me. And she was, first of all, just so grateful that I didn't leave the school year. It goes to show you should make the right decisions. And she said, oh, there's an opportunity to recruit. And they're just expanding the team, the outreach team, which is, anybody knows about uncommon recruiting. They're split into selections and outreach. Selections are the folks that actually take you through the process and interview you. Outreach are the folks that get people through the pipeline. And she said, I think you would be great to go to career fairs to build relationships with college professors, people who are in education, and help build our pipeline of great quality teachers. You should do it. And so largely because of her and her recommendation, I started recruiting.
Yeah, shout outs to team outreach. Not a lot of schools are built like that. And so now in my role, I do full cycle recruitment, so outreach and selection. But those years doing outreach, it was like the Wild West. And, I remember talking with you, talking with Kev, and it's just like all of these strategies that we had to come up with to figure things out. It was just amazing. It was an amazing opportunity and really helped me to become the recruiter and talent person that I am today. Shout outs to JT too. Shout outs to Quinn again, of course, because Quinn is just that dude. And had he not exited his role on talent, I wouldn't have joined the talent team. So I appreciate him. And so you talked about that piece of not leaving. And that's something I want to just pause and put a pin in really quickly. Teachers, educators, stop abandoning your kids. Stop leaving your kids high and dry. Teaching, and both of us will readily admit this, is arguably the hardest job that either of us have ever had, admittedly so. But abandoning your kids is not the right choice. If you're having a tough school year, if you have some amazing opportunity that feels like I may never get it, you'll get that opportunity again. But what you won't be able to get is those opportunities back with those children, leaving them high and dry and leaving them early. Stop abandoning your kids. See them through to the end. Just like Daniel said, he didn't go to Capitol Hill, but another opportunity arose because he did it the right way. And so shout outs to you, man, because I know that having to continue to defer that dream of going to Capitol Hill and being a part of politics had to have been tough. But you knew that it was most important to make sure that your students were successful. And so I appreciate you and love you for that, man, because those kids needed that.
And you know what, Malcolm? It's so funny because, I would not be where I am today if I hadn't have made that decision. If I'd gone to DC, my life and everything, the trajectory of my career would be entirely different. So, and we'll talk about how I got into this and why that is in a second. But yeah, no, you're right. Do it right.
Dope, man. That's awesome. And I love that reflection there because that's true. When we make those decisions, they change trajectories, they change where we end up. And you seem really, really happy where you are. So I know even though you had to make that tough choice, it was definitely the right one. So you're joining the outreach team, you've transitioned from teaching, you're now in this recruitment seat. But you and I, just to be fully transparent, had conversations around how that just really wasn't what you were trying to do. At certain points, you realized that you were no longer happy. And so talk to us a little bit about that, some of the difficulties that you had to face as an educator that ultimately led you to making this transition to where you are.
And so it's fascinating. It wasn't necessarily the difficulties I had as an educator that led me to where I am, to make that pivot into media, but It was a challenge. I mean, I definitely think, again, just because of the landscape that education is in New York City right now, a lot of people aren't going into education. So trying to be innovative and trying to find ways to connect. I mean, I would literally go to career fairs, and there would be, back in the days where we could all be right by each other without masks on. Isn't that crazy? And I would be, one time I was placed right between Google and Facebook. I wish people could see my face right now because I'm giving side eye. Google and Facebook and little old me. And I literally, my job was shooing people out of my lines because people were over my booth, right? And no one could see little old me because the other two lines were getting so crazy that the one or two or three or four people that would want to come see me, I'd have to literally swat the other folks out of the way so I could just talk to the people interested in coming to my booth. And so I always appreciate, shout out to the organizers of career fairs when we can do those again, who would organize them by sector. I don't know why they're not all organized that way. Maybe it's a way to get kids to think, oh, there's Facebook, oh, there's a teaching thing, I'll go to both. I don't know, but I liked the ones that were like, this is the education, because then everyone that came to our section was, you know, interested in education. So things were definitely, it was a challenge trying to get people just into it, and having those conversations with Kevin and with other folks on the team who were really passionate about recruitment work, as I started being less and less so, was also challenging, right? Anybody that's in a job that they're not as passionate about, and you've got other folks who are super passionate about it, especially if they're managing you, it's tough, right? Because you are thinking about a number of other things that you could be doing and not focused on 100 entirely percent on the job that you're actually doing. And so that created challenges in and of itself. And I'm happy to talk about kind of what ultimately led me into that media sphere, but I don't want to overstep myself because I can do that.
No, I would love to hear that because that's really what this section is sort of about. Like you said, Kev is so passionate about that work, and working for Kev and working with Kev, like you gotta meet and exceed that energy or it's noticeable. And especially being a part of like the outreach team, because all of us, like and shout outs to the career fair organizers too. I love what you said about that division between like for profit, nonprofit. I've definitely been to career fairs where I'm surrounded by like finance groups, and I'm at Uncommon. And anyone that knows Uncommon knows, especially in the Northeast, like that's a brand name for like organizations, charter management organizations. But even still, when you're surrounded by like Fortune 500 companies, finance companies, and these kids are looking at you, and I'm like literally snatching every black dude I can. I'm grabbing every like Latinx person I can. Like, hey, like learn something about education. I know you want to go and be a banker. I know you went to school for finance, but here, come talk about teaching math. And that conversion rate was horrendous, but still, I've definitely been in those positions. At any career fair that does separate it is so impactful to our work and our workflow because like you said, we get kids that are really focused on that career path and trajectory. But no, I would love to hear about like how realizing your passion was decreasing and potentially increasing in other areas ultimately led you to where you are right now.
All right, I hope folks are still buckled up because, whew. So I had a friend, Alden Peters, shout out to him, who said to me, I think you have a really great personality for media. I think you should consider it. He worked at this thing called Mike.com, similar to a BuzzFeed, a digital media platform, and said, I think that you would be really great to host a show on our platform. And I was incredulous. I thought, me hosting a show? And I really had not even entertained the idea of being in media at all. And so I met with him and I met with two producers, and they agreed. They were like, we love you. And so I'm always one that's like, you know what? Why not? I always say, shoot for the stars, keep going, try something new. Like, just lean in, lean in. And so I did. I went and I met with them, and they were at World Trade Center. I went up, and we had a whole testing day where they put me in makeup, they put me in a chair, I read a teleprompter, whole thing. Then I put together this pitch, a whole pitch, where I filmed a pilot episode about drag queens, and put together, kind of this pitch deck to the team, and that was ultimately rejected. and this was 2016. So from August to December, I was working on this pitch, working on the pilot episode, pitched it to them, and then in December of 2016, it was rejected. So that was devastating. I first of all cried, was super down. And then what got me through, and this is actually, I'm glad that you have a section on tips and tricks. What got me through was actually looking at graduation speeches, looking at the J.K. Rowling, Oprah, uh, Steve Jobs, great one. A lot of just words and advice of people before you who've paved a way and who've been successful in whatever field they've chosen, but who've faced failure. And so I have my first quote that I love is that failure is just life giving you a better story to tell. And what I realized is Steve Jobs got fired from his job from Apple. He got fired from the company he created. Oprah got demoted from her first job on TV. J.K. Rowling, Harry Potter, which has become a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, maybe even trillion at this point. I don't know, but a lot of money got rejected the first 12 times. Faced rejection 12 times. And so I thought, okay, I think I'm pretty good at this. These people don't think I'm pretty good at this, but maybe this is just failure giving me a better story down the line when I eventually get successful and eventually, reach a certain pinnacle in a career in this industry that I can share with other folks to say, hey, keep trudging along. There were people too that once thought Daniel Grimes wasn't good enough. I can have my name thrown in the mix of like, I got rejected plenty of times. And y'all already heard, because I guess that was the third or fourth piece of humble pie I ate. But rejection is fun. And so, lean into it and learn something from it and grow. So I hired someone to teach me Adobe Premiere. I hired a camera woman, and I launched my own digital show called Daniel's Desk, where I was like, if they're not going to give me the opportunity, I'll take it myself. And it was tough. Oh my goodness. I remember one time I was in Fire Island and everyone was, Fire Island's the gay haven wherever all the gays go to, kind of relax and have fun. And I was there and everyone was hungover, drunk, etc. That next morning, I was not. I was like, okay, I have to go. I have to walk this, mile to this other side of the island so I can meet with this potential interview subject, who is Monet Exchange. If you all know her, very famous drag queen, for all your queer, LGBTQ listeners. And so this was way before Drag Race. She was like, listen, I'm about to get on an island I'm about to get on a ferry going back to New York City, but I've got 10 minutes if you want to meet me now and talk about whatever your show is. So I trudged my little butt at 8 a.m. in the morning, met her right before she got in the ferry and was like, hey, this is my deal. This is what the show is. I'd love to have you as an episode. And I got her, and that was, then I think I had 1 or 2 or 3 camera people at the beginning. So I hired someone, they canceled, they dropped out, someone raised their rates. And I was like, listen, I can't afford that. And so I finally settled on a camera person, but there were challenges even at the beginning. It wasn't just, I started my show and it all fell into place. There was trying to book guests, as this little old no one, trying to find people to be on my show. It was tough. It was challenging. But I did it. I got Johnny Sibili, who I think that's how you say his last name. He does memes and stuff on line. I got Oprah's makeup artist, Derek Rutledge, who agreed. That's his own story. I'll spare you that story. But it was challenging, but it showcased exactly that I was in the right space, and I loved it. I loved getting that interview. I loved being able to do the interview. I loved just every moment. That then led me to getting discovered. I don't even use that term anymore. Teen Vogue. So Teen Vogue found my work, and they were doing this thing called Teen Vogue Take, kind of like The View, where they take a panelist of millennials and they just give them a salient issue, and you give your opinion. So they had scoured the internet looking for just people who seemed like they might be a good fit for that, and they found me. So I went in for an interview day with other folks, who were also had been found, and I nailed it. That was the day when, it was a couple years ago, but Monique was, who's the actress Monique with Precious. She was, complaining about Netflix not paying her enough, and so I went in and I was like, yeah, Monique, I don't even remember what I said about her, but I was like, it was interesting and exciting, and I thought I did a really good job. Didn't hear back. So they ended up, I emailed the person who had found me, and she ended up saying that they decided to go with folks internal because of contracts, and it was just too tough to kind of get these external contracts. But that was the biggest catalyst for me saying, listen, I've gotten just close enough, right? The first time with Mike, second time with Teen Vogue, just close enough. And I'm also getting to a place in my regular job where it's starting to drain me as a person, that I'm going in and I'm just angry, that even just answering an email from a colleague or answering an email from my director, I was coming from a place of just, I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm a naturally very affable, fun, easygoing person. And so I started to recognize that change within myself of, oh, Daniel, you got to get out of this space. You got to take a leap. Now, did I want to go to grad school and take on student loan debt that I didn't have from undergrad? Hell no. I tried it. I tried to pivot. I was looking at jobs and ways to pivot so I didn't have to take that on. But I thought, if my mental health is at risk, right? Because being just waking up angry, having to go into this job that was actually not a bad job. It was very chill. We were able to work from home a lot. We were able to, have a lot of autonomy. And so on the surface, people were like, oh, it seems like you have a great job. But it wasn't for me. And I had already realized my passion, and that was eating me up every day, not being able to do that passion 100% of the time. And so I applied for Northwestern. I got into grad school there, and that sent me to Washington for the year in journalism. But I'll stop and let you ask questions if you want, because I could keep going.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
Yeah. And so this is Mal Davis, Third Lap Podcast, talking to Daniel Grimes, who is just an incredible human being, and he's now talking about his pathway to where he is. And so you said that you went to Northwestern, you went to DC. You and I talked throughout this process, and all the way back to Daniel's desk, I want to take a step back just to say that show was incredible. And that show was the first time that I really learned anything about drag. My wife watched RuPaul's show, and I never really got into it like that, just because it wasn't really my cup of tea at that point. But like, I learned so much about drag from you and from your show, and it really just helped me understand that like there are so many aspects of life that I don't interact or exchange with because of like quote unquote taboos, that like it really helped me check myself. And so I really appreciate you for that. And you had so many opportunities. Remember, you had one guy who was a gay man that was a Trump supporter and like a Republican, and like even that episode was really informative to hear from someone that I would think would not support Donald Trump and his campaign because it's so staunchly opposed to like LGBTQ rights. But hearing him present why he did what he did and why he does what he does and supports what he supports was just great. And so I wasn't surprised at all that you've now like launched yourself into the stratosphere of entertainment, because you've always had it in you, and I'm glad that like you now see it. And so you were talking about Northwestern, the program that you went to was a 1-year program, correct?
Yes, and I had to issue a correction. I have not launched myself to anybody's stratosphere. Okay, I am still firmly planted. Let it be known. Now, I would love to reach the stratosphere now, but right now I am firmly not anywhere up there. But thank you, Malcolm. I appreciate it.
He's being humble. It's cool though. But yeah, so 1-year Northwestern program, dope program, awesome opportunity for you. And so talk about where you are right now as like the on-air host. Before we even logged on today and like started recording, you were talking about just sort of how like even being in the role you're in now means that sometimes you have to transition and do different things and be super open. So yeah, talk about where you are now, man, and like certainly overall from here, where are you trying to now take this?
Yeah, so right now I am a weekend morning anchor and a reporter at an NBC affiliate in Charlottesville, Virginia. Now, many of you might know Charlottesville for the tiki torches and the white supremacists that marched in our streets in 2017. But Charlottesville is so much more than that. It really is. That is a awful, terrible blip on what otherwise is a beautiful, beautiful city. I oftentimes tell people I report in Charlottesville, and that's their first thing. So I wanted to say that. But I report and anchor, and at this day and age, reporting is so different than what it used to be. I have one of my former professors and I still talk a lot, and he's in his 70s. And so, he'll be like, oh, so what did you discuss today? And where's your team? I know one time I had my jacket, it was up, the back, my collar and my suit coat was up. And I reported and it went well, and he sent me a text of, hey, why didn't your team notice that your collar was up and your back, while you were on TV? And I thought, there's no team. What are you talking about? They're literally, it's just me. So nowadays, reporters are called MMJs, multimedia journalists, where you do everything, everything. So you take the tripod, you with the camera. You go shoot your own footage. You do the interview part of it. Then you come back and you write up everything. You create the narrative, you create the story. And then after you write that up, you send it off to your editor, they make adjustments, and then you go and you film your own. Really, especially at this level, gone are the days of cameramen. We call them photogs in the industry, but gone are those days. So you're setting the camera up yourself to then film yourself shooting your intro and outros to whatever you're reporting. And then again, you video edit that. So you get on Premiere or whatever software you use and you edit that as well and you send it. So from start to finish, you do everything. You're finding the stories, you're reporting, which is good and bad, right? It gives you a chance to understand all of the elements that it takes to report, but then also it takes away from what I think is a lot of that investigative journalism piece because you used to have so much more time to really issue FOIAs, which are the Freedom of Information, requests, and try to really take a lead and see where that can take you. You can't do that as much now, where you're just turning out story after story, oftentimes 2 or 3 stories a day, in the small market size, and add that on top of the amount of journalism jobs that are just being cut in the industry, especially in print journalism, where there used to be a huge partnership between broadcast and print at this level and at all levels, and how a lot of print jobs at local news outlets across the country are dying. I mean, our newspaper had cuts this week, last week, and I'm sure there's going to be more cuts as the year concludes. So that makes me a little sad to look at the media landscape, but I still think it's exciting to be able to affect change and affect policy. And I still view myself as a teacher. I just have a bigger classroom. So I'm still out here teaching folks about voting. I just did a whole 2 or 3 stories this week about the things you have to know here in Virginia. We have a constitutional amendments that you're voting on. A lot of folks didn't know that. That the General Assembly got rid of a voter ID law in Virginia. Felon voting. A lot of people with a felony can vote, and they just have to really go to a website and fill out a little form, which goes to the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office, and basically, but they might be disenfranchising themselves if they didn't know that information. We talk about knowledge is power, right? So I still am a teacher. It's having a bigger classroom and a larger impact because you're speaking to a bigger audience. But it's fun. I so enjoy every bit of what I do. I do now.
And I love to hear that because I know, as you said, towards the tail end of Uncommon, that wasn't how you felt. And so being able to see you and I can see the difference in your energy and like you said, you're affable, really just go happy go lucky, just loving life kind of person. And I love seeing you at that point now in your life where you really are loving what you do and don't have to kind of pursue that outside of your work hours. And so ultimately, where would you like to go with this? If you look at your career, several years down the road, where do you see yourself?
Well, before that, I can't remember. I know you mentioned in the beginning advice, and I don't know if that's before or after this, but I want to make sure not to forget that because I have some good advice to folks. What I've seen from people, whether they are college kids or whether they are people my age, I mean, we used to sit around and talk about this with some folks that were teachers. People are so often and likely to make excuses for why they can or can't do something. I did it myself. I thought, oh, I don't really don't want to take on debt, student loan debt to pursue this career, or so I have kids, or I've got a house and a mortgage. And listen, totally understand. I'm not saying that excuses aren't 100% valid, but I just try to live my life, and I really would push and hope that others can do the same. At the end of the day, when you are on your deathbed, your dying day, and you look back on your life, are you really how are you going to look back? Are you going to look back on the things that you did or didn't do, right? And so I want to look back on my dying day and say, wow, I lived a kick-ass life, right? I came here, I got a few bruises along the way, but I never had that what if. What if I just taken the leap and left New York City to pursue this passion of media, right? And again, as I said, I'm not in anybody's stratosphere, so this still could have been the biggest flop in the world, but to me, it won't have been the biggest flop, but even if I don't reach any sort of pinnacle of success in this industry, because I am happy. So I think that is right. Your mental health, your happiness, and the energy that you bring and you carry and you present to the world is so important. And what you do day in and day out for work is a huge part of and can affect that energy that you bring to the world. So I say take the leap, jump. Why not do it? Stop making excuses for yourself, whatever that excuse might be, and just if you're thinking about doing something. I know people. One person was literally thinking about being an opera singer. She was teaching, and she's like, "I would love to do opera. Go, do it, try. And start something small like I did. Start where it's maybe you're volunteering, you're going to just sing for free. I mean, again, I paid to do Daniel's desk and devote a small percentage of your time, and then over time that percentage might grow and grow and grow based on context and connections and what you meet, and the just the snowball effect of doing it. But do it. Try to live your life with no regrets. And I guess that's a simple way of saying it, but I think you'd be happier if you just did it. All right, now to answer your actual question, sorry to politician you, and I know I have to get my hair cut, and I know you got to do work. So your question was where I want to go long term. Long term, if I'm being real and honest, I would love to eventually have my own talk show down the line. That's my jam. If broadcast is still a thing when in 10 years, it'd be so fun. I mean, who wouldn't love to come out and have a studio audience clap for you every day, chant your name? Like, come on, that's just fun, people. It's fun. And just, again, have salient issues, have topics, be a teacher, but to an even bigger classroom, being able to talk about topics that interest you. And as you said, with drag queens, help educate and bring perspectives and, people to other people and make people think about things that they hadn't even thought about before. So that's definitely a goal. But, I am the happiest I think I have been in my life. And let me just for the record say I'm the brokest I have ever been in my life. So I don't want people to equate happiness with money. There is no money in local news, not a cent, a penny. Like it's not that. It's just that I made a leap and I'm doing what I feel like my calling is. I feel like I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do, which makes me happy. And I really actually feel like, and again, this is not a narcissism thing. It's not like oh, woe is me. But because I'm in the space that I feel like I was meant to be in, I feel like I will go far. But if I don't, I'm happy. So, yeah.
Awesome, man. And so I know that we're running out of time here, but what is something that motivates you or keeps you pushing? You mentioned a few things, but if you want to name like one or two things that really motivates you and helps you keep going, what are they?
I would say, well, we haven't talked about my old Mama O now. Listen, Mama Oprah, she is my therapist. Okay, I have not paid a cent for therapy, but I go to therapy every day, folks. Oprah is my therapist. She gives me, great advice on how to think about things and how to navigate this world. So if y'all can't afford a therapist, I recommend Oprah. Great therapist. But I would say what motivates me is passion. First of all, I'm every moment, every chance that I get to do a story that I love. I love talking about politics still, and talking to elected officials. I did this story this week where I got to talk about where is the next round of COVID-19 relief funding. People are out here hurting. We haven't had the first round of funding came in March, so people have lost jobs, unemployment rates are up, regardless of the partisan politics. We need money, right? People are out here suffering, and so I in my job have the privilege and honor to be able to talk to representatives and push them and say, what are you doing to help bring relief to the American people that sent you to Congress to help them out, right? And so I love that. I love the just being able to do what I do, and that drives me. Waking up and be like, oh, I got this story today, and oh, I'm gonna answer this. And again, whatever it is for you, finding that thing that will enlighten that passion, it's going to motivate you and drive you. And connections,
Right.
relationships, family, friends, whoever it is in your sphere. I love building those connections and having those relationships, and whether it's someone like you who I met years ago but we still talk on a regular basis and build and connect, or it's new connections that I'm meeting, whether it be for work or just for fun. I love building those connections and relationships with people, because you can't do this alone. You can't do this thing called life alone. You've got to have people who are good energy people in this together with you.
Absolutely. And so, what are you reading, or what would you suggest as a reading like book, article, anything along those lines, I'm creating a book list for the website. It's on the website now. And so
Okay.
each person that has come on the show has suggested books that I've added to the list. So what are some books that you add to that list?
Okay, now this is where your readers are probably going to give me side eye. But what I read like suspense novels. I love no self help, but I love some good suspense stuff. So I this summer I think I've read about 4 or 5 different books. My Lovely Wife was one of them. It's all fiction. It's this one's about this couple who the wife and they're like a nice suburban couple on the surface, but really what happens, when those doors shut is a whole nother thing. So that one was really good. I just picked up a book called My Lovely Neighbor, or My Next Door Neighbor. It's something. It's basically this couple next door, similar. They are, I think, a murderous couple, and so I really love that suspense stuff. It's a little. It's nothing self-help, it's nothing exciting, but if you need a good suspense murder mystery or who done it novel, I'm your guy. I can send you the 4 or 5 titles I read this summer. But Stephen King, good. I love that stuff.
Yeah, definitely send me the list and I'll make sure to add them. This doesn't have to be motivational books, suspense. I read a bunch of like crime fiction books. I love it. So, it's a really diverse list. And so, Daniel, as we close things out, what is your social media? Where can people find you?
Oh, okay. Wow. Well, so most things are DNL Grimes, Daniel Grimes, Facebook, Twitter. I think on Facebook I just changed it to Daniel Grimes Media. You can find that page. But yeah, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm not on the TikTok yet. I don't think I'll get on that because again, that's for the young folks. But unless you're on TikTok, I don't know. But are you doing it?
No, I'm not. I'm struggling with Instagram, so TikTok is beyond me. I struggle with social media across the board. DG, man, I really appreciate your time today. This was just awesome to be able to connect with you, learn more about your story. And as much as we've talked and interacted over these years, I learned a lot about your trajectory just in this episode. And so I look forward to you being able to share this with family and friends and me being able to share this across my platforms as well. This has just it's been awesome as always. And so, this is Mal Davis, Third Lap Podcast, speaking to Daniel Grimes, news anchor, reporter, just all around rock star, soon to be TV host in the future. I want my free tickets too, man. I ain't paying for no tickets. Again, thank you so much for your time today. Any last words you want to share?
No, thank you for having me. Listen, I again honored and flabbergasted that you would even think of me. So, thank you, for having me on. This was so fun, and I hope I didn't just ramble too much.
No, this was perfect. I'm so glad you got a chance to tell your story. And so again, this is Mal Davis, Third Lab Podcast, signing out. Each one, teach one. We all learn together. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Third Lap Podcast. This is your host, Mal Davis. Please visit thethirdlappodcast.com for more information about the podcast, about our guests, and also to see our reading list. You can find us at The Third Lap Podcast on LinkedIn and Facebook, at Third Lap on Twitter, and at third_lap_podcast on Instagram. If you know anyone that would be great to be featured on this show, please reach out to our host, Mal Davis. He's always looking for interesting people to learn more about them and to talk about their pathway. Thank you so much again. Have a good one.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
Yeah.